Bree Owens. I'm Stewardship Coordinator with Western Landowners Alliance. And I am going to introduce our panelists that we have today joining us. First off will be Jesse Jewin, who is with the New Mexico Association of Conservation Districts. Jesse spent most of his career with the BLM, retiring in 2012 as the New Mexico State Director, and now provides technical assistance and support through NMACD for producers and other partners implementing stewardship. Clay Nichols will go next, and he is with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He's the lead biologist for the Lesser Prairie Chicken. Clay grew up in eastern New Mexico in a small farming and ranching community, and will be giving us an update today on the Lesser Prairie Chicken. Then we'll have Joy Alsbach, who is a lead for conservation programs with the Farm Service Agency. And Joy will be talking with us today about the grassland option under the Conservation Reserve Program. And then to round out the webinar, we have Kyle Dillard and Brett Riley, both ranchers and land stewards in New Mexico. And they're going to be sharing how they've utilized some of the programs and practices that we'll discuss today to support their land management. So with that, if you have questions throughout the webinar, please enter them into the Q&A function. And then we'll get to most of them at the end as we have time for. And if our panelists, if there's a couple clarifying questions or things like that, panelists can go ahead and answer them as we move along. But we'll address the majority of the Q&A at the end. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Jesse, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Bree. Appreciate that. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of programs that are available in eastern New Mexico through NMACD, and they're both of them are resource conservation partnership programs. I'll pull up our here. So some of you may very well be familiar with the Rcpps. That's the acronym for it. And it's really focused on implementing land health type practices on farms and ranches, but in a partnership fashion where you have multiple groups coming together. And those groups are not only helping figure out what the best strategies are for implementing practices on the ground, but it's also about contributing resources to solving that. And there's really four big areas that they look at when you apply for projects. One is the impact of what kind of type of projects you have that are going to help turn around a resource challenge out there on the ground. The second one is the partner contribution, and that's really about direct cash-related type partner contributions and in-kind type of contributions. The third one is innovation, which gets into what kind of technologies or other approaches are going to help in terms of resolving the resource challenges, and as well as delivering out the conservation practices and solutions out on the ground. And then, as I talked about, the partnerships and management. And I'll show you guys a quick map. New Mexico's been involved in Rcpps for a number of years, and there's several of them throughout the state. And this is a map that shows some of the ongoing Rcpps that have occurred and are currently occurring throughout the state. The first one I'd like to start out with for you is the Eastern Plains. Let me pull that one up. There we go. So the Eastern Prairie Grassland Initiative is a new Rcpp. It has not been announced yet, but NMACD was awarded that. And it's going to be roughly $1.5 million for financial assistance to landowners on the ground. And there's a variety of conservation practices that can be implemented. Pull that up here for you. But the biggie there, the innovation, is what they have found over time is, particularly in good Lesser Prairie Chicken habitat, Chavez, Roosevelt, Lee County, we've been battling the encroachment of mesquite brush into good grassland and shinnery oak habitat for Lesser Prairie Chicken. And so we've done a great job. I think landowners and agencies have done a really good job of figuring out how best to kill the mesquite. The difficulty is the birds still have that standing dead mesquite, and they don't really like to use those areas because of the height of that standing dead mesquite. And what they've determined is that if they can masticate that dead mesquite and knock it back down, that the birds will quickly come in and colonize those areas. And we've even had leks start up in those areas. So this initiative was really to help raise that conservation practice and really get that going out on the ground. And the effort still includes eradicating mesquite where it's an issue, and also implementing grazing management strategies that continue to enhance the habitat, post treatment of the standing dead mesquite or the live, killing the live mesquite. I'll show you on that map again where that priority area is. And let me blow this up a little bit for you. So you can see here Roosevelt County, Chavez County, and Lee County, and there's 5 priority blocks. Those 5 blocks right there are existing habitat where we have existing leks and populations of lesser prairie chickens in eastern New Mexico. So any of the applications that come in that either lie within or adjacent to or partially within any of those blocks are going to have a little bit higher ranking just because they're within those priority areas. And these priority areas were established by that partnership. So you have Game and Fish involved, State Land Office involved, you have landowners involved, you have BLM involved, the local soil and water districts are involved. So it's a fairly broad partnership in terms of where those priorities ought to be and how they ought to target habitat enhancements and practices. And of course, NRCS and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service have been involved in that as well. I think I mentioned there's a $1.5 million available. There's also funds available for NMACD to assist landowners on the ground if they want, in terms of developing cooperative resource management plans, actually design and layout of projects. Could be everything from engineering to just helping them lay out what the project should do and how it should be implemented. And then also monitoring and outreach. So part of what we're doing now is really trying to get the word out, and they hopefully will have an announcement coming out within the next month or so for this particular RCPP. I'll jump to the next one. The second one I think would be of big interest for you all would be what we refer to as the Restoration, the New Mexico Restoration Initiative. And it's for rangeland and forest land across the state. So when you look at that map, there wasn't they thought it would be too cumbersome to try to put a hatch mark across the entire state of New Mexico. The one unique feature about this is that because the way our jurisdictions lie, many of the ranches have private, state, federal, tribal lands across that. They really wanted to make sure that a landowner who does apply has a portion of federal lands in with the private lands. In other words, they're trying to cut across jurisdictions to make sure that the practices are addressing landscape type issues. There's a broad variety of practices that have been identified in this particular initiative, and the initiative could be forest thinning type practices, it could be rangeland improvement type practices, brush control, fences, water developments, it could be wildlife specific habitat enhancement. So it's a really broad one, and this is the second time NMACD has received an RCPP for this category. And in this one, there's about $2.8 million that are available to landowners on the ground to apply for. And this is a good example of where that matching dollar is fairly significant. And the example here I give is BLM has committed $9.3 million of their own resources and time and effort on the ground throughout the state over that 5-year period for the RCPP. And you also have Mexico State Land involved with this one and committed, New Mexico Department of Agriculture, And we have 3 or 4 agencies that are committed with the Eastern Prairie Grassland Rcpp as well. The same opportunity that is provided here through this Rcpp, NMACD has some funding through this effort to assist landowners, again, with the development of cooperative resource management plans, cultural resource type work if you have a project that requires that type of clearance, any monitoring and or design and layout of projects in the future. There we go. The only other thing I would like to add is that, even though there are priority areas that assist, can give you a higher ranking, if you will, on both of those Rcpps, that does not preclude any landowner from applying for either of these projects. So if you don't happen to be within the Lesser Prairie Chicken 5 priority areas, but you really want to do work that would enhance habitat, not only for your rangeland resources, but for Lesser Prairie Chicken, that's fine. You can apply for that. And the same can be said for the broader restoration initiative. So we just needed to have a geography that we could understand how it was tied to the resource concerns out there on the application and why that might be a priority if somebody was within those areas. So for the restoration initiative, the last thing I'll say is that BLM shared what they thought was priority areas for them by field office. And then Mexico State Land Office under the Restoration Initiative has shared that they would like to have Chupadera Mesa considered as a priority area for them as it relates to state land. But again, that's just that is an up factor for ranking and ratings, but it does not preclude anybody from applying for those. Bree, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop there, and there may be questions now or later in the presentation.
Thanks so much, Jesse. That was great. Appreciate the information. And if folks want to follow up with Jesse, we'll be providing contact information. We'll send that out following the webinar. So thank you. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Clay Nichols, again with Fish and Wildlife Service, and Clay's going to give us an update on the Lesser Prairie Chicken status.
All right, thank you, Bree. Let me see if I could share my screen successfully here, and I pull up a quick PowerPoint presentation for everyone to see. All right, can everybody see that? All righty. So as you heard, I'm Clay Nichols. I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm the lead biologist for Lesser Prairie Chicken issues. And so I'm physically located in Texas, originally from New Mexico, but I cover all 5 states with Lesser Prairie Chicken issues. So I'll do a quick rundown of the current ESA status and start off with some background, and then go through a few quick things with you, and then at the end I can answer questions during the group Q&A session as there are any. So just a quick species overview. The Lesser Prairie Chicken is a species of prairie grouse that occurs in 5 states. New Mexico, Texas, Colorado, Oklahoma, and Kansas. I should be clear, portions of 5 states, not across the entirety of those 5 states. But biologically, the species requires large tracts of continuous grassland and shrubland. They're a boom-bust species with annual reproductive success driven by precipitation, which is one of the things that makes it a little bit difficult to judge. You can't really place a lot of emphasis on annual population estimates, because we know that those will again track with precip. Years with above average precipitation, we'll see increases in local bird populations. Years with below average precip, we'll see declines in populations. So judging success of conservation efforts on a short-term basis is really difficult because of that. So we got to keep our eye on kind of that long-term population trends and trajectories, and make sure that we're not overreacting to short-term increases or the opposite way, short-term decreases in populations. The primary threat to lesser prairie chicken is habitat loss and fragmentation. Here's a quick map that of those areas that I mentioned. You know, the bigger polygon is the historical range of lesser prairie chicken. The four colored smaller polygons represent the estimated occupied range. And so further south there, the red one you'll see is the sanctuary oak in Texas. Moving north, you got the blue polygon, which is the mixed grass prairie in Oklahoma, portions of Panhandle of Texas, and portions of Kansas. Then the sand sagebrush, which is in Colorado, in Kansas, and barely spills down into the Panhandle of Oklahoma. And then the shortgrass CRP, which is up furthest north, the green one in Kansas and portions of Colorado there. So here's just a quick timeline of some of the big points around the Endangered Species Act and lesser prairie chicken decisions. I won't go hit every one of them, but some of the highlights would be that, you know, all the way back in 1995 was when the Fish and Wildlife Service received our original petition to list the lesser prairie chicken. In 98, we determined that it warranted protections of the ESA, but was precluded by other higher priorities. Then fast forward to 2012 is when it was first proposed for listing. Finalized a rule in 2014 that listed the species as threatened across the range. Then a court decision, and shortly after that in 2015 vacated that listing rule, so it's no longer protected. And then shortly after that, we received another new petition to list the lesser prairie chicken, and it kind of kicked off that process again to kind of reevaluate and go through things. And we actually just recently delivered a federal our 12-month finding to the Federal Register that published June 1st, which I'll go over in a bit, but proposes to list lesser prairie chicken. And we are in the midst of a public comment period right now. And so one of my reasons for wanting to come talk to the group is to encourage everybody to make sure you participate in the public comment period. There's a lot of information available out there, and ensure that all the appropriate information was included. If we missed something, make sure and let us know. If we mischaracterize things, or you have additional information you would like to be considered, please make sure and let us know that through the public comment period. So I mentioned our proposal to list. One piece of information that's available for public review is the lesser prairie chicken species status assessment. So just some quick background on species status assessment, or I'll call it SSA for short. What the purpose of an SSA is to provide the scientific background that would then inform a policy decision. So the SSA is kind of all the biology that then Fish and Wildlife Service decision makers evaluate that and then apply the policies under the Endangered Species Act to inform the decision. So the science document is available for review and comment, as well as the policy decision. We developed this in close coordination with the state fish and wildlife agencies. After we had a draft report, it did undergo a 60-day peer and partner review. And for the peer review, we selected 5 independent peer reviewers that are species experts. And then for the partner reviewer, that was primarily state fish and wildlife agencies, as well as federal agencies delivering conservation actions for lesser prairie chickens. So that's kind of the process that we went through to develop the SSA. When you go in and look at it, you'll see a few sections in there, and at the highest level really is what the SSA does is it describes the species needs. Then it talks about the current condition of the landscape, and has a discussion about how that current condition may or may not be meeting the needs of the species that was just described. And then talk about the future condition of the landscape and how that landscape may change over time given threats and conservation efforts, and how that may or may not meet the needs of the species. So due to time, I won't go into a ton of detail, but lesser prairie chicken SSA is very extensive. But at the highest level, the species needs, as I said, large contiguous landscapes. The primary threat that's identified in that document is habitat loss and fragmentation. The current condition is that we've seen a 80 to 90% reduction in populations and available habitat for the species. Future condition is that we are projecting habitat loss and fragmentation are expected to continue, as well as additional threats like climate change. So I separated this slide out, not because it's separate from the SSA process, because it does deserve its own recognition though. There are a lot of conservation efforts that are ongoing. So when thinking about, the current condition of the landscape, you not only have to consider the negative things, but you got to think about the positive things that are occurring out there as well. And there's a whole host of positive things occurring for lesser prairie chicken. Here's some of them. This isn't all of them. There's other things in the SSA. And I won't go through these one by one, but I did want to put them up there and recognize, the significant effort that has been put out to conserve lesser prairie chickens thus far, and assure folks that, again, they're described in the SSA, those efforts are, and were incorporated into the overall analysis. So one quick background note I should mention is distinct population segments, because I'm about to talk about that on the next slide. It's something under the Endangered Species Act that people haven't, that's not as common, people don't talk about as much. So I want to provide that quick background of what is a distinct population segment. So under Section 4 of the ESA of the Endangered Species Act, it says that the Secretary shall determine if any species is endangered or a threatened species. Then it goes on to further clarify that the term species includes any subspecies of fish, wildlife, or plants, and any distinct population segment of a vertebrate. So that's where the term comes from. Then further in our policies, we go on to, we had to break that down a little bit and say, that's pretty vague. What does it take to meet the definition of a distinct population segment? And so we have two criteria that you need to meet to be considered a distinct population segment. One is that it needs to be separate or discrete from other populations. And the second is that it has to have significant biological or ecological value. So once you determine that a population meets those two criteria, that population on its own can be evaluated and determined if it meets the definition of threatened or endangered under the ESA. So here's just a quick rundown of our 12-month finding. The Lesser Prairie, the Fish and Wildlife Service, when we published this, we said that we concluded the Lesser Prairie Chicken warrants listing under the ESA. We are proposing to list two distinct population segments. I'll show a map of this on the next slide, so don't try to memorize where these occur, but we're proposing the northern distinct population segment is threatened with a 4D rule. That includes the short grass, the sand sagebrush, and the mixed grass ecoregions. And we're also proposing a 4D rule that would apply all the Section 9 prohibitions except for two things. It would allow the continuation of routine agricultural activities on existing cultivated lands, and it would also exempt the application of prescribed fire across that northern DPS. So no permits or anything would be needed to carry out those two actions. Then we are also proposing to list the southern distinct population segment as endangered, and the southern distinct population segment consists of the San Shenry Oak ecoregion. And note that we are not proposing a 4D rule for the southern DPS because this 4D rule is something that is only available to threatened species. So only species that would have the threatened status. If it's listed as endangered, the ESA precludes the service from using Section 4D to exempt activities. And so this is my last slide here. Here, the map on the left of your screen is that original map I showed you, and the map on the right is the map of the distinct population segment. So what you'll see is that northern distinct population segment just groups together those northern three ecoregions. And then the southern distinct population segment is the San Shenry Oak ecoregion in eastern New Mexico and portions of the Panhandle of Texas there. Right, so that's all I have. Let me stop sharing my screen and go back on mute. Thank you all.
Thanks, Clay, very much. We appreciate the information. Appreciate you joining today. Okay, at this time, we're going to invite Joy Elspach to share with us about the Grassland CRP program administered through FSA. Thanks, Joy.
Hey everyone. I just kind of wanted to give a plug for the Farm Service Agency. Right now, we are currently accepting applications for the Grassland CRP program. This program is designed to assist participants in essentially, sorry, did somebody try to say something? Okay. So essentially, this program is designed to help participants keep grassland in grassland and conserve our grassland. And in return, they receive an annual rental payment. That rental payment includes regular agricultural practices such as haying and grazing. There are some restrictions as far as the nesting season. That occurs is kind of at the state level. There is no haying during the nesting season. That is a rule that is applicable across the board. But as far as grazing restrictions, those are done kind of on a state-by-state basis. Just some recent changes with the Grassland program. There's now a minimum rate of $15 per acre, which affected over 1,300 counties. Many of those counties being in Colorado, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas. So we've seen a large increase in the rate for the Grassland program, which has been will be very beneficial for participants. So also, which may be of interest to you, is two new national priority zones for the Grassland program. And those, I don't know if I can, let me see if I can share. I did pull up that. Let's see. Let's do this. Let me see if I can share this map. This may be of interest since part of New Mexico. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes, we can. You're good. Thank you.
Okay, so as you can see, a portion of New Mexico, the western counties, and then a few other counties are included in the National Grassland CRP Priority Zone. And what that means is individuals within that area will receive additional points for enrolling in the Grassland program and will also receive an additional $5 an acre. So if you're shaded in that area, those counties will receive $20 an acre as of right now for the Grassland program. Also included in this year's sign up 203, is a 5% climate smart incentive rate that's already included in the rate that I announced. So that's there. But we do have available, the sign up last until August 20th. Like I said, you can still perform your normal practices for haying and grazing with those restrictions during the nesting season. Participants will have to follow an approved conservation plan from NRCS. That means you'll have to meet those minimum height requirements. Let's see, you have to have owned the land for 12 months prior to enrolling in the program. There are some exceptions there, but I encourage you to contact your local FSA agency if you have questions related to that. Let's see, also we can help assist with cross fencing and livestock water for grazing distribution. However, that does have to meet a resource concern. So NRCS would determine if those items were needed, and if they are needed, then FSA would help cost share to develop those. Let's see. Just kind of some of the requirements for the Grassland program. You cannot have more than 5% tree canopy on your property. That excludes your eligibility. So if you have, and you cannot have invasive species on the property. So if you have invasive species, those will need to be addressed. If you have areas of canopy with greater than 5%, those will have to be addressed. And shrub does not count as a tree. Shrub is an eligible practice. So we're looking at maintaining the existing vegetative cover, which includes grasses, legumes, and shrubland. Fire suppression related activities and construction of fire breaks is eligible. We want you to be able to maintain that grass like you normally do. And if that means prescribed burning, that's great. We're huge proponents of that. But all grazing related activities with those restrictions from the conservation plan are eligible. See, the contract period is either 10 or 15 years. So as a participant, or when you make an offer, you would have the eligibility, you would have the opportunity to offer either a 10 or 15-year contract. A 15-year contract would yield more additional points. And then we have available on the webpage, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. We available on our webpage is all of the ranking factors for Sign Up 203. And I can put that in the chat. I'll put a link to it so you'll be able to go in and look. And there's an overview of the Grassland program and also a list of all the ranking factors. So you'll be able to look at those ranking factors and determine if you might be eligible for those points. Okay, I believe I could go in more depth if I need to. Bree, I'm not sure how much I could go into a lot of detail, but I don't want to tie up all your time.
Yeah,
as far
go ahead.
As far as Clay's presentation, he does a great job of explaining the Lesser Prairie Chicken stuff, and this program will actually, I think, be very beneficial for those participants and would be great for the Lesser Prairie Chicken.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions for you, just real quick to clarify. And one, I also have the map of the New Mexico state wildlife priority. So I'll go ahead and share that. So since it is relevant to folks in the eastern part of the state.
I guess do I need to stop sharing?
I believe so.
There we go.
Sorry, I'm having trouble sharing. Sure.
I may have that map, but it'll be the whole, it would be everyone, not just New Mexico.
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm having a security warning messages popping up, so it's not wanting to work for me. But yeah, if you have it, that would be great, since it does. Again, there is a state wildlife priority area that covers part of the eastern part of New Mexico. And so as Joy was talking about ranking criteria, that does allow for some additional points when offers are ranked. I had a question for you, Joy, in regards to Rcpp and the programs that Jesse shared on. Are folks eligible to participate in Rcpp funded enhancements if they are in a contract for Grassland CRP?
With our programs, a participant cannot receive duplicate benefits. So I think a lot of that would probably hinge on what they were being paid for under the Rcpp program. So with our rules say that you can't be enrolled in EQIP or CSP and be in the conservation Grassland CRP program. So I think if I remember right, Rcpp includes both of those programs. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's changed a little bit. So it's not specifically the programs, they just have land enhancement funding or land management, and then land rental payments. So it's changed a bit the way that they define it or describe it.
We would probably have to check into that a little further to see. Like I said, it's been a long time since I've dealt with Rcpp, but I know our handbook rules say that they can't be enrolled in EQIP or CSP and receive payment under this program.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the web page that we just updated, has It has basically the fact sheet that talks about the Grassland program. It's a working lands program. I mean, it's designed for the participant to still be able to use his land like he normally does, but then to keep it in ag production or into grassland, not ag production. But so if you click on this Grassland CRP ranking factors, there's oops, I don't know why it does that. I guess I opened it in the wrong program. Let's try Edge. But I believe that your wildlife map is on here, because I think I'll link to it. Well, it's not New Mexico's, but it will be the national map that would show the wildlife zones for New Mexico.
Okay.
Let's see.
One other question I had was for the conservation plan development. My understanding is that that can be developed either by NRCS staff or a technical service provider. How would a producer go about, do they have to request to have a technical service provider create that conservation plan? And I'm curious because NMACD has TSPs, and so they would be available potentially to develop that.
Right. So the TSP program is essentially done through NRCS. They have to be certified through NRCS. If they are a certified TSP, then I think that all they would have to do is request the TSP do it instead of requesting NRCS do it. But we don't really have any TSPs where I'm from, so I'm not real familiar with it other than the fact that they have to be certified through NRCS.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, New Mexico does have a pretty robust TSP program, so that may be an option for folks if they're interested.
There's a couple of links on this webpage. There's the threat to conversion map, and this is essentially based off of it's land that has a higher threat of conversion, and essentially it's looking at the total number of rangeland acres or grassland acres in your county, and the more rangeland you have, the less likely it is to be converted, is kind of the thought process behind that. And that's where that point system comes from. Let's see, but there should be another map here. Yeah, so the state grassland zones, I believe this may be what you were looking at, but I could be wrong, and it's gonna make me open it anyways. That's okay. If anybody is a computer guru and can figure out how to make that thing not save when I open it, I would love to know how. Let's see. Come on. Okay. So here's the national grassland priority zones, and I'm assuming this kind of in line with what you had, Bree?
Yes, very, yeah, it looks about the same, yeah, for New Mexico. Yes. And
so states will have an opportunity, I think, to change these this year. So if you're involved in the local led process or on the state technical committee, I think that will probably come around where they'll have an opportunity to relook at those zones.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Anything else I can show you?
Okay. I think we're good for now. Thank you. But once again, just want to remind folks that if you have a question for any of the panelists, please go ahead and put it into the Q&A. So at this time, I am going to turn it over to Kyle. Once again, Kyle and Brett are both land managers in New Mexico, and they're going to share some of their management strategies with us related to the programs and practices that we've been discussing. But Kyle?
Bree, can I just interrupt for 1 second?
Yes,
it doesn't look like the Q&A is working, so if they can put their questions into the chat box instead.
Okay, thanks, Lawrence, for that. So yeah, just go ahead and put it directly into the chat if you have any questions for any of the panelists. Thanks. Go ahead, Kyle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jesse asked me to speak a little bit on some of the things that we've done that I thought was the most beneficial for the Lesser Prairie Chicken. I think that it's not really any one thing that we've ever done, but our overall grazing management plan. I run cattle on 3 separate ranches around Mill and Sand. All of it is a pretty large rotational grazing. 1 herd on 2 of the ranches, 2 on 1. To do that, we had quite a bit of infrastructure that we needed to improve upon. Probably the first being water, moving as many cattle as we do. And we typically move anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks is about as long as we stay, depending on the time of the year, size of the pasture. We've done a lot of pipeline. We've had to install quite a few tanks, not necessarily more tanks, is larger tanks, a lot of pipeline. We've converted just about every windmill that we had to solar, so it would be more reliable. A little bit of storage. We've done a lot of brush management, a lot of mesquite, not only the chemical treatment, but also the mechanical treatment of the dead standing, a little bit of shinnering, not very much. I think we treated, I don't know what it was, maybe 400 or 500 acres. But the majority of it has been water and brush. We've done quite a bit of fencing, and on the fencing that we had done, it wasn't so much to change the size of a pasture to make a larger pasture smaller, which although we did a little bit of that, but for the most part, the fencing that we've done is to change it to soil type on those pastures that had a little bit of tight ground, and the majority of it was sand, where we were beating up the tighter, more desirable country. We changed a lot of our fences to better allow us to graze better. That's really, I don't have a lot to say. I've used lots of different programs to do so. I've done the LPCI. I've just started with Grassland CRP, enrolled into it last year. But on all of the things that we've done, I think that not that any one was better than the other, but having an overall grazing management plan was the most important thing that we've done. Early on, some of the things that we did, you always see what you should have done. And I think that maybe because we've done so many different practices now, we put quite a little bit more planning into it before we go into it. But everything that we do is definitely with a plan and all around our grazing management plan. And that's, unless somebody has a question, that's probably all I've got for you.
Thanks, Kyle. We appreciate that. And I'm sure I have questions, but I'm sure other folks will too. But I think we'll jump over to Brett, let him share, and then we'll come back to the questions if that's all right. Thank you. Brett, if you want to share, please.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you all for letting us come on today and kind of share some of the activities that we've had. I know Kyle and I have, been involved in this prairie chicken meetings and all the programs that we've had over the last 10, 15 years. So some of our stuff's going to be pretty similar. We're only probably 30 miles as a crow flies from each other. We, like Kyle, have utilized a lot of the NRCS programs. We've utilized the EQIP program to, improve our water storages and our drinkers, put in miles of pipelines. Also done a lot of fence replacement, sprayed quite a bit of mesquite, both through the NRCS programs and also the outfit that Kyle works for, Kim, has provided some of that. We were a part of the, we had part of the Ranch and Lesser Prairie Chicken initiative a few years ago, and that helps Again, we've just got a new equip program the other day that we haven't started yet, but it's basically mesquite mastification. We're a little behind Kyle on that. We haven't started it yet, but in talking to him, it's really kind of a game changer. He shared with me that it made a bigger difference than what he thought it would, and we're looking forward to that. Basically, again, I'm going to piggyback on Kyle. It's a total program that works. It's not one certain thing. I mean, you can't go in there and improve your waters and not expect big changes. You can't just go in there and move a fence and expect big changes. It's got to be the whole program. It's got to be, how you graze that country, how you utilize it during the different seasons. We try to change up and graze certain pastures during the growing season, certain pastures during the dormant season, try not to hit them 2 years in a row during the grazing season or growing season. If we do, we try to make it later on in that to try to utilize, so we're not pounding on one grass species that comes up at a certain time of the year. We try to manage our country, I guess, as if we're in a drought all the time. And, of course, in southeast New Mexico, that's not far from the truth. But I think you always have to be prepared for the worst. And then when, like this year, I think from May 2020 to May 2021, we had right at 3 inches of precipitation, which, as y'all know, isn't very much. But we didn't have to sell any cows. We had plenty of old grass left over. And we got through it. Your supplement is a little higher, but that's to be expected. But and I think the reason that we were able to do that is because we had, implemented some of these practices that the NRCS and KIM and those type organizations had allowed us to do. We were prepared for that drought when it hit. I think that's one of the main things that I can, say that helped us the most is that when those bad times come, you have to be ready for it. One other thing I'd like to say is that, in managing these ranches down here, sometimes you have to kind of take what you've got. And, in this shinnery country that we run in, of course we have the shinnery, but we've also got, all kinds of subspecies of grasses that have came in, either through the oil field or, however they came in, along the highways or whatever, and they're invasive species. And so you have to kind of utilize them to some extent, knowing that they're not your primary grasses, but sometimes you have to manage around them or manage them to work for you. I think that's important. You just have to play the hand you're dealt. As always, and Kyle's just like we are. For those of you who don't know, we have the sand ranch down there, and the ACEC sits right in the middle of us. So we have quite a few eyes on us, how we conduct things, how much, stubble we leave, that type of thing. And just like Kyle does, but I think something that maybe doesn't get talked about enough is the fact that, we all say that we want to provide the habitat for the wildlife, and that's certainly one of our goals in doing this. But if you provide the habitat for the wildlife, one of the consequences that comes along with it is you also are providing, for lack of a better term, cow habitat. If your country is sustainable and suitable for wildlife, it's also going to be, in good shape for running cattle. So I think that's something that everybody needs to think about, is that they kind of go hand in hand instead of it being two separate things. Some of the results we've seen, through utilizing these NRCS programs and Kim's involvement, we've got in certain pastures, we've seen 200 to 300% increase in our grasses and forbs by spraying the mesquite and pasture rotation and our grazing plans as to when we graze and the timing of when we graze. And it's like everything else. Ranching anywhere is tough, but everybody goes off the annual precipitation as to whether or not you're successful, but a lot of times it's the timing of that precip as much as it is the amount of it. So you have to be real cognizant of that and understand, what grasses you have where, and be very flexible, I guess would be the best word to say, on your rotations. Everybody wants to plan out a year or two in advance how we're going to be, which pastures I'm going to go in, how I'm going to utilize this, but sometimes Mother Nature kind of throws a curveball at you and you've got to change that. So that's something that we've been fortunate, the BLM in our area, has been really good about working with us and allowing us to make those changes, because we've got the relationship, I guess, in place that they understand that we're gonna try and do what's best for the habitat and for the country, and in turn it helps us out too from a ranching standpoint. We've had a lot better utilization of our pasture since we've started doing this. The cattle, through the grazing rotations, and also through the timing of when we graze. I mean, we get corners covered that we never got covered before. We're getting some grass distribution out in those corners that we haven't had before, and a lot of that's due to the fact of these practices that we put in place. One thing that we found over the last 2 or 3 years, 4 years, 5 years that we've been doing this is that our condition score of our cattle has increased also. I think that goes hand in hand with what we talked about a while ago. Utilizing these programs to increase the habitat for the wildlife is a great cause, but I think something that we need to get out there, to our fellow ranchers, is that by doing that, you also increase, like I said a while ago, for lack of a better term, your cow habitat. I mean, if it goes hand in hand. So if you're working on one, area, say the wildlife, cattle part will come into play. And I don't think a lot of people really understand that. They kind of throw a roadblock up when you say, well, we want to protect this habitat for wildlife, and we want you to install these practices and do these things. And they say, well, what about, my cattle operation? And I think that's something that is important to get out, and for people to understand is that they do go hand in hand, that they, when one does well, the other one does. So it's really a win-win for everybody. And the last thing, of course, by doing these practices, one of the main goals, one of the things that we set out to do in the beginning was to improve the wildlife habitat. I know we were seeing chicken distribution on our ranch was scattering out. I mean, before this last drought, we had quite a few chickens moving south. I found them within 3/4 of a mile. Those of you who know the area, 3/4 of a mile north right there of that rest area there on highway between Roswell and Tatum. So, and we never had chickens that close to the highway before since I've had the ranch. I've had it for 15 years. So again, I kind of piggyback on Kyle. It's utilize all these programs, make them fit your situation. Not every ranch is the same. You can go 10 miles and you're in a completely different set of variables. But I think the important thing is that you pay attention to your ground, pay attention to your, what's happening on, your species and the grasses and also the forbs and the brush, and any type of brush control that you can do, I think is a win-win situation. Again, both for the wildlife and for the livestock operations. So I guess I'll kind of leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett and Kyle, both. We appreciate hearing, your stories, your examples of what you've been working on and the successes that you've had. One question for you both is, what are some of the indicators that you're looking at? So as you're doing your pasture rotations, as you're, you mentioned that cattle livestock condition has gone up, that species diversity, forage species diversity has gone up. Are those kind of the indicators that you're looking at, or what other things are you looking at as you're kind of tracking, I guess, your progress?
I guess I'll go first. Yeah, I think you just watch your key species is what we try to do on our grasses. We've seen a lot more big blue coming into a lot of our pastures that we didn't have, 8-10 years ago when we got the ranch. I think that's for sure an indicator that we're trying to do things right, or that we are doing things right. The other thing is, like I said a while ago, sometimes it's not the positives, but it's the negatives. I mean, we've got places, and I'm sure everybody in our part of the world does, where we've got, a few pastures that got quite a bit more layman's low grass than what we would like to have. But at times when it's dry, or, early in the spring, or, there's certain periods of the year when you can utilize that, and you just go in there and you can't graze that stuff too hard. So you just hit it as hard as you can and get out of there and utilize it. And, in doing that, you're resting, that other country that needs a little time, to come around. So I just think it's a holistic approach that you have to take. You know, of course, we watch double heights. We do, you know, Kyle's probably a lot better at monitoring things than I am as far as the technical stuff. And he knows, you know, from working with Kim and being on the ranch that he's on, that he, you know, knows how to do all the surveys and those types of things. I don't know all that stuff, but I just watch the grass and the cows, and we try to make sure that they're both kind of in tune with each other, and that we don't overdo either one. We kind of try to take the middle of the road in our approach. Kyle?
I don't have a lot more to add, you know, other than so often it depends on what we're trying to see change in that one pasture. If it's a certain species of grass, whether it's a cool or warm season grass of the time of the year that we're in there, if we're trying to get more like big blue stem, we're not in there early on in the year, you know, as an example. The other thing, so much of our rotation is dictated a lot by the weather. And if it's raining, what time of year it is, you know, it takes a lot of how fast or slow we're moving. And it's just constantly being out there and observing it and seeing what's happening. And early on, you know, a lot of that was with probably more monitoring than just visual. But as you get a feel for it and you're out there and you see how those cattle are spread out and what parts of the pasture they're using or they're not. And like I said, depending on the time of the year of how hard we want to graze a particular pasture, you know, late in the growing season, we don't stay as long as early on if it's raining. That's just kind of how we do it.
Another question that popped up, do either of you use enclosures or exclosures to monitor or any other formal types of monitoring?
We do, and then I'm also the conservation project manager for Kim. So on all of the enrolled ranches, that's something that we do through Kim. It's on a 3-year schedule. Every ranch that is enrolled with the CCAs is monitored every 3 years. So that is something that we use to define, you know, utilization is with the cages.
And yes, we do. Of course, you know, like Kyle just said, his outfit Kim comes on and does their monitoring on us, and then also we've got, you know, BLM monitors us pretty closely, so we kind of stay in touch with them to make sure, you know, what we're seeing on the ground coincides with what, you know, their actual monitoring and that data tells them. So.
Something else that I'll add that I think helps a lot if somebody's wanting to start doing some things and see the difference, one being pictures. You know, if you can even, I mean, everybody carries a phone anymore. And if you can pick a spot that whether you mark it or you know where you're at, if you'll take pictures a couple times a year and go back and look, it's a good way. The other thing that I think is important is it's important to plan what you're going to do. And a lot of people want to write that down. It's not as important to me as writing down what you actually did do, because then you can go back, you know, at the end of the year and you're driving around and noticing different things, being able to look back and see what you actually did and the benefits that it had or it didn't have gives you the ability to modify that and change it. But I think the pictures just, it's pretty easy to go by and take a picture and roll back through on your phone and look at a, you know, a certain area, and that visual, I think, helps a lot.
Can you both speak a little bit more about your grazing planning and how do you go about determining your rotation, keeping track of your rotation? How far out in time are you planning that rotation?
For me, I used to plan everything about a year ahead of time. And some of that, one of the ranches I run cattle on is on the Nature Conservancy. And so it was something that they were wanting to see. After doing it for a couple of years, I found that it probably wasn't as important as maybe we thought it was, because it changes so much. because it's a pretty big place and the rainfall can be so different on one end to the other. Those kind of thing changes. I think all of us have certain pastures that it's real hard not to be in the same time every year, for like when we brand or when we ship or coming off of shinnery. So there's certain pastures that I have anyways that they get hit the same time every year, but those pastures are probably babied along more so when we can than anything else, because they are so much more important, or maybe not so much more important, but we know we're going to have to be in there a certain time. So the least amount of time we can be there, we are.
Yeah, I think, you know, we're a lot like Kyle. I mean, you try to document it and go a year and a half out and say, yeah, we're gonna, you know, graze these pastures during the dormant season, these pastures during the growing season, you know, this much time in this pasture during the growing season. But, you know, Mother Nature has a way of kind of changing that from time to time. So you have to be, you know, on your toes and pay attention to which pastures and, you know, we're scattered out for 13 miles across there. So you know, it's very seldom we get the same rain in the same part of the ranch. So you've got to be, you know, flexible enough to know that, you know, if it's a pasture you just came out of when you want to rest, and of course, you know, even if you get rain, you still are hesitant to go utilize it again. But if it's one that's close and you can just, you know, maybe bump one up on the schedule or something, then it, you know, kind of gives you some flexibility to do that kind of thing. I think what Kyle alluded to just now about the, you know, the pastures that are, you know, you don't want to say they're your favorite pastures, but the ones that are good are the ones that are, you know, close to your working facilities, which is something you can't, you know, just pick up a set of pins and move them. So you have to be very cognizant of the fact that, you know, those do probably get more, you know, more use than what you would like them to, and you can't really rotate them. So you, like he said, you have to kind of, they get a little more rest than most of them do. But having said that, I mean, we've got some pastures around, you know, some working facilities that we've rested for the last 10, 12 years and used them 2 weeks out of the year or something like that. And we're just now getting grasses back into them, you know, that weren't there before. So it just, it's kind of like everything. I mean, it takes a long time to get, you know, a good grazing rotation put together and to get your pastures where you want them. But if you don't pay attention to what you're doing, and if you overgraze them, or if you hit them too hard, it doesn't take very long at all to really set them back. So just be cognizant of that and be aware of what you're, you know, pay attention to what, you know, your country's telling you. I mean, watch it and then kind of manage off of that. But you know, that's not a very good answer, because I'm sure everybody wants to know, do I do A, B, and C? And you can have A, B, and C in place, but it doesn't always work out that way. So.
Yeah, certainly doesn't. It's a very dynamic situation. One more question for you both. With the listing of LPC, do you see any impacts on your operations, or how might that change your operations and or your management?
For me personally, I don't think I hope it doesn't change. I mean, we're, especially on the Nature Conservancy, all 3 ranches that I run cattle on are heavily populated with prairie chickens. Everything we do is with the prairie chicken in mind. So in saying that, you know, as far as our management style, I don't think things will change. I don't see it being different.
Yeah, I guess I kind of, you know, maybe it's more, you know, we don't want it to change, then it will change. But no, we've done everything that we feel like we can do over the last 10, 12 years, you know, to prepare for this, because again, it's kind of like a drought. I mean, you never know what's going to come up. So you try to have, you know, all your ducks in a row and do the things that you're supposed to provide the habitat for the chicken. Of course, you can't always dictate where the chicken's going to be, or whether you're going to have any precipitation in the spring and have forbs and have a good hatch or have a bad one, or, you know, so many variables included in that. But no, I think we've, you know, tried to do a good job of having our, you know, our country in the best chicken habitat that we can have it in, and then kind of let Mother Nature go from there. So I don't really see many changes. I don't know, I don't know what the bureaucrats are going to throw at us, I guess, so to speak. I don't really see that changing much. I mean, I think we're in pretty good shape, but and we are not in, Kyle's up there right in the middle of the deal, right in some of the core habitat. We're kind of in the fringe, I guess is how I would explain it, where we're at. We do have chickens, but you don't have to go very far, different ways off our ranch to where there's no chickens. So our goal has always been to improve the habitat, right next to where we have the chicken, to try and expand their boundaries a little bit, and then we'll continue to do that. So hopefully we'll continue to work together and everything will be fine. So.
Great. Well, thanks to you both again for sharing. A couple of questions for Clay. One, and you might have provided a written answer, Clay, but if you could share, when is the comment period deadline?
Yeah, so one note really quick before I go into that, I'd like to note that, when we think about the implications of a potential listing, final listing decision on landowners in Southeast New Mexico, one note I always point out is the majority of landowners in Southeast New Mexico are already enrolled under a candidate conservation agreement with assurances with Kim, or a candidate conservation agreement, or have BLM lands. And so, for those folks, they're already doing what would be required in a post-listing decision. So for example, if the species is listed, anybody, again, the majority of that land is enrolled through the Center for Excellence. So anybody enrolled has regulatory assurances and permits covering everything they're doing. They're already, that they'll continue doing exactly what they're doing right now into the future. And so that's a big thing to ensure everybody recognizes. The other note is that, Bureau of Land Management already has on the federal land side of things, already has the folks doing what they need to be doing for lesser prairie chickens. And so, there's a bureaucratic process called Section 7 consultation under Endangered Species Act that the service and the BLM would go through, and those landowners would be covered for all those actions. There shouldn't be any additional requirements in a post-listing environment. So that's the beauty of the environment of Southeast New Mexico, where there has been a fairly large contingency of landowners. I'd say the vast majority of landowners are participating and doing the right things in those programs. So the effects of the listing should be relatively minimal in that portion of the range. But the comment period, and I can't believe I didn't mention this, I should have covered it during my presentation. So we are in the midst of a comment period, like I said. It was originally scheduled to close August 2nd. We got a request for extension of that. So we extended it an additional 30 days. So now the comment period officially closes on September 1st. So you still have about 21 or how many days that is, 20 something days, a few weeks left in the comment period.
Great. And in regards to, types of information that's useful for the service, can you share kind of what you're looking for? Would, economic impacts, production impacts, and or, just what Brett and Kyle shared with us in terms of their management and the benefits of their management. Is that type of information helpful?
Yeah, so I think, it depends upon who is submitting information. So when I think about things like the Center for Excellence or FSA or NRCS, what's most helpful from them is to, again, have them reaffirm that we've accurately described their conservation efforts and the benefits that their efforts are providing. So that's for those groups kind of, implementing a bunch of these larger scale umbrella type agreements. But for individual landowners, it's a bit different. There's a few things I say there, like, we're always interested in hearing the positive things that are occurring, but I also acknowledge, the privacy issue, and again, you could submit comments anonymously through there if you want, but folks maybe not wanting to come forward and say, hey, I have lesser prairie chickens, I've been doing this, and this, and they feel like it could put a target on their back, and and I acknowledge that. So, but my biggest thing is anything that folks could provide about the valuable things that are going on the landscape to ensure those things are not overlooked is really what we're looking for there. We feel like we've done a pretty good job in capturing it, but covering a 5-state range, there are probably some things out there that you missed. And so, for example, from Jesse and his folks, if they say, hey, we didn't see any mention of our Rcpp stuff because it hadn't been announced yet, but we want to make sure that's included. That's a great one that you should submit and point out to us. So, again, largely that's kind of where I fall like in thinking about for this type of group. Point out the good things that are happening out there and ensure the due credit is being given for those and they're not being overlooked.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. Another question for you, Clay. I guess similar to some of the evidence coming out on like sage grouse, talking about those boom bust cycles in relation to annual precipitation. Are you seeing, is there any evidence showing that like with enhanced land management, we can start to mitigate some of that boom bust cycle?
Yeah, for sure. And there's a little bit of information out there on it. And I think the biggest thing is, I tell people on some of these topics, it's internally, I try to tell folks on some of it's pretty common sense. Like, you think about what drives lesser prairie chicken nest success, and that's having the appropriate vegetative composition and structure to provide thermal cover. Well, when do they nest? They nest early in the spring. So that means they're reliant upon standing vegetation from the previous year's growth. And so leaving vegetation in condition at the end of the growing season and moving through the winter to ensure that is there becomes important. And so I say all of that to say it's pretty obvious a lot of those properties that seem to withstand drought more than others. It's all relative because every property is going to be affected. But the properties that seem to withstand drought a little better are usually those that have a pretty robust drought management plan, whether that's formal or informal, and the landowner's just really in tune and knows when to pull back and not. Those properties usually fare better as compared to people management styles where they're being reactive as opposed to proactive. So the reaction of, well, I kept thinking of, I come from Eastern New Mexico area, and I understand the thought of it's maybe next week it'll rain. The forecast seems maybe the next, and it's easy to fall into that pattern. And next thing you know, it's been 2 months, and by that point, to Brett's point earlier, if you get to that point, it's too late. And so being proactive in your thoughts about rotations and rest periods becomes important. And if you do that, you'll have areas where the prairie chicken is much more resilient, and the busts won't be as dramatic, and the booms will be more dramatic ultimately. So you're keeping them from dropping so low, and then when they have a good base to recover from, and when they recover, they'll recover even to a higher level than previously. And so I think it goes along well with the points that Kyle and Brett were making about just being in tune to what's happening in real time and trying to be proactive, understanding you can't plan out for a year or 2 years, but literally on a daily, weekly basis, understanding what's going on those properties becomes important. And the most important thing there is we as government agencies can say a lot of things, but it falls back to the landowner ultimately, because even if they wanted us to come out and try to help them, we can't go out on a daily basis, weekly basis, anything like that. So the landowner in this equation is literally the most important one there. And you could definitely tell when landowners are in tune to things and have those have the right mindset for sure.
Great, thank you. A quick question for Joy. So one of our participants or listeners has had an issue with getting in contact with their FSA office, and we know it's a busy time right now with other programs too. So can you give a recommendation if they are struggling with getting in touch and getting a response, what should they do to proceed?
And I talked about this in the chat, but if you are having trouble getting making an offer, make sure that the county office understands that you want to make an offer, and ask them for a receipt for service. Typically, whenever we get into a situation where counties are understaffed, sometimes the agency will use what we call a register, but they won't do that until they know for sure that it's needed. And so that county, Roosevelt County, is not like any other county. We've got a lot of counties that are overwhelmed right now with all the different programs going on. So the agency won't make a decision to use registers, and like I said, until they know it's needed. So if you contact that county office and tell them that you want to make an offer, ask for a receipt for service. That way you have documentation showing that you asked to make an offer, or at least ask for an appointment. Then you should be covered from that. Like I said, I think everything kind of seems like it funnels down towards the end to sign up, and it gets a couple of weeks, towards the end to sign up, everybody starts kind of freaking out, which I don't blame you, because you want to get your offer in. But just be patient with them. They're trying, so it's busy everywhere. But if it were me, I would just ask for a receipt for service. That way you're covered if for some reason they didn't get to you in time. So, but they should. If they don't, if it looks like they still have offers coming in, and it's like I said, the agency will address it when it gets to that point.
Thank you.
No problem. And I actually already contacted the conservation chief in New Mexico, so she's taking care of that already. She's going to look into it just to make sure.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah. And wanted to circle back to Jesse. Have a question for you. In relation to the RCPPs, and it's particularly on the restoration Rcpp, given the partners that are involved, you mentioned that there's opportunity for assistance on like cultural resource review. With those partners in place, is there other permitting requirements that are handled, or so like in relation to NEPA? Sometimes that can be a barrier, and so is there assistance being offered through the RCPP or through NMACD?
Yeah, there is. Typically the other one that tends to slow things down quite a bit is if there's a need for endangered species review. So any Section 7 consultation, things like that. And yes, that is available. There's a limited amount of funds in terms of cultural and ESA type assistance, but there is funds there if the project requires that. Yeah. And the agency can also help. So if there was, let's say there's an applicant that was successful, but a couple of the projects are going to require some intensive work like that, then the agency themselves can help and step up and say either they can do it, or they can say NMACD, if we pass you the funds, will you help make that happen? So that, like, very much like that technical provider piece you were talking about.
Great, thanks. And one other question related to the RCPPs. Given the extent of state lands in New Mexico, are state lands included under practice availability?
Yes, they are, absolutely. And the state land office is also, this is their first time as a direct involved partner with the two RCPPs that I mentioned. And so they have a little bit different approach in terms of they don't necessarily have well thought out planning and necessarily where they want to go on each chunk. And so they're just now kind of getting into it. But the quick answer is absolutely. And then if on those two brochures that I highlighted, there's points of contact for NMACD, as well as your local NRCS office that you can tie in with. But if you had a specific question about a particular area, whether it be state land or public lands or et cetera, just give those contacts a call and they'll track it down for you.
Thanks.
Yep.
Brett and Kyle, one other question that popped up for you both. Are either of you using radio receivers in your rotational grazing systems? Or if not, is it a product that you will look at in the future? Or are you using other technological applications?
I mean, I can go first. I guess they're alluding to the virtual fencing that coming out. Is that?
I think that might be what, yeah, that's how I would take, but
that's where I
Bill,
went with
maybe
it
you
anyway.
can clarify.
Yeah, we don't have any at this time. We would love to. I mean, we visited with the folks at Texas Tech. We've been doing some research on the ranch, and that's something that we talked about maybe getting into. I really think that if you know, the technology's there and we could do it, that would be a game changer, in my opinion. If it's something that we could do, we've utilized the collars on cows, but it was just to track them, you know, as part of the project that Texas Tech was doing on the sustainable ranching research project they had. But no, if you know, and I think it's in the infancy as far as I know, you know, and it might be farther along than what I'm aware of. We tried to kind of keep track of it, but that would be great if it did. We would certainly utilize it, and it would, like I said, it'd be a game changer. So.
We're not doing any of it. I don't have any experience with it at all.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, that wraps up our questions, and we're just about time. So I just again want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists. We really appreciate you taking the time today, and all the listeners. We appreciate you joining as well. We will, like I said, be sending out contact information for folks. So if you have follow-up questions, and we'll be providing the documents that Jesse shared, so the additional contact information will be available on those as well. So once again, thank you very much. We appreciate the time, and that'll wrap it up.